My name is Dianne Goolkasian Rahbee, and I'm happy to be speaking with you today. I grew up in Waltham and eventually had connections through my father, who was a pharmacist and had a drugstore that he worked in Belmont Center for several years, and I used to come to work with him quite often and work as a soda fountain jerk. It's where the fish store is now in Belmont Center. And there were several drugstores at that time in Belmont Center. And I remember I had wonderful memories of being in Belmont as a young person, just walking around while my dad was working, or in the store when so many distinguished customers came in. The great physicist, I always forget his name. He was one of the great geniuses. It'll come to me in a few minutes, but it was an unusual man. In the middle of winter, he would come in with just a jacket on and ask for a Coke, and I would give him a big, large Coca-Cola, and he would drink it in one gulp all the way down, and I couldn't believe it. And also Cedric Chase, the great artist, was a good friend of my dad's, and he was very often in the store and had good connections with him also.
Both parents were Armenian, is that?
That's right, yes. My father was one of the survivors of the genocide, and he came here as a young child and has written actually a wonderful book, which is at Belmont Library. It's his own edition. We published it ourselves. It's a very, very special child's view of all his memories. He wrote this book when he was 84 years old, and the memories flooded back. It's quite wonderful. I actually sent a copy of it to Elie Wiesel, and he wrote my father a beautiful letter about it.
Wonderful.
So
wonderful.
It's very special. And my mother was born, her parents were from Armenia, and they were, her parents' parents were all killed in Armenia, and she was born in New York. So she was actually a New Yorker from.
And are there Armenian themes that come through in the piece that you wrote for the record players?
Well, I very often, there are times when I am consciously aware that there are Armenian influences, but other times that I'm not aware. So to tell you the truth, I'm not aware of any that are in these particular pieces. But so often people say to me, it sounds very Armenian, and I don't hear it. It's like having an accent. It's sort of it was my first language. I grew up first learning Armenian because all my grandparents and relatives spoke Armenian. I had to learn English before I went to school. So it's like an accent in everything I do. But my musical training was the typical classical training, so it's a combination of who I am. Everything I write, my musical language is indicative of everything I've experienced. So it's a mixture of things. But as I said, most often it's unconscious.
You originally wrote these pieces for flute and piano.
That's right.
And
I wrote them actually many years ago for flute, for a young flutist that became part of our family almost. It was very sweet, Mimi Stillman, who was 9 years old at the time I wrote them. And she has now become one of the world's greatest flutists. And when I had a Carnegie Hall concert some years ago, and many of my friends who I've written pieces for came from Europe and so on. It was quite an exciting concert, and she asked me if she could play her bagatelles at the Carnegie Hall. I said, well, Mimi, I wrote those for you when you were a child. She said, well, please, can I play them? I really like them. So she did, and then she's been performing them now at several of the flute conferences and things, and they seem to be enjoyable to some people, so I'm very happy about that. the pieces were written with Mimi Stillman in mind. She was young, she was energetic, she was full of fun, and the pieces sort of emulate her spirit. And her spirit was so wonderful that I think it makes people happy when they listen to them. So they're sort of enjoyable pieces. They're not profound, but they're enjoyable. And I think sometimes there's a place for that kind of music. And so it does lend, many people have asked me to make different kinds of arrangements of them.
Do you have anything else you would like to say about?
You know, it's a pleasure living in Belmont. Belmont is so full of wonderful intellectual people, musicians, in all fields. Just an exciting community to be a part of, and I've been living here for many, many years now, and have loved every minute of it. My children grew up here; they graduates from Belmont High.
You've taught endless students, and the piano pieces that will be played were written for two Belmont residents, Mildred Freiberg and Ted Hennessy. And Ted, you wrote a piece for him when he was how old?
Oh, he was probably around 9 years old. That was one of the pieces I wrote for him. And he was such a wonderful young man. He's such a spirit. He loved music so much. It was so much an important part of his life. And he went on to play other music after he studied with me, and he was a brilliant kid. And when the 9/11
terrible tragedy.
It was a terrible tragedy, and I wrote a piece for him, an in memoriam, which I later integrated into a large piece. It's a ballad. It's flashbacks of 9/11, and that in memoriam piece is part of the big piece. But it's played now quite often, and it's been also arranged for all kinds of instruments. People have asked me to arrange it for various instruments. The in memoriam and the yeah.
And Mildred was a friend of yours and a colleague, and
she was a wonderful musician, and was so welcoming. When I moved to Belmont, immediately she was just there to help in every way, and all through my life in Belmont she's been a help to me and to so many others. She's just one of the great musical figures in Belmont, and we miss her so much.